Welcome back to part 2 of ex8 for csc200. We're working with PHP in Goorm, and hopefully everything's working okay. We just created a new folder called ex8, or a directory, which is a folder, and we created a file called index.php, and we just connected to our database using this script that we got from W3 Schools. And everything worked okay so far, at least for me. Hopefully it's going to work for you. And what we're going to do next is connect to phpMyAdmin. So we're going to take a little break from working with this script. What we're going to do is actually put a database in phpMyAdmin that we can connect to, because we connected basically to our server, but we didn't really connect to a database. Now, to get there, if you remember on the previous, when you first did your Goorm setup, I'm just going to backspace here, and you don't want to go into the workspace folder. You could go right here to goorm.io. So just backspace your address here, and then instead of Goorm PHP, you're going to type in phpMyAdmin. That's going to take us to that application that hopefully was working, that you logged into. So I'm going to do that right now. And if it says no activity, that's okay. It just means I have to log in again. And it already says phpMyAdmin here for the username. And I'm going to put in root. And I'm going to hit go. And I'm not going to save the password. And remember, you should see 5 things over here if you did it correctly, if you updated the privileges from the previous exercise, ex8. And make this a little bigger, I guess, if you want. I'll make it a 92, make the copy a little bit bigger in here. And what we're going to do in here, we have no databases in here yet. We're going to go to SQL. Because if you go to databases, it's going to ask you to kind of create one. Here's where you would create a database. And you can create it that way. But we're actually going to put in code, so we generate it all at once. So we're going to create our database with SQL code, just like we've created tables with presidents and vice presidents, the same kind of way. So this is where you could put in SQL code in phpMyAdmin. And you might be saying, well, what code am I putting in here? If you go to my Warren, to Documents and Resources, and I believe this is Unit 7, and there it is, Unit 7. There's a file here called world text, and it says SQL code. It's actually an SQL file, but I saved it as a text file because it's easier to put it into my Warren. And you're just going to copy all the text in here and put it into your SQL window. Now, you could either download this file, or you might be able to click on it and just have it here open in a tab and highlight everything. So I'm going to do that. If you have any problem, then just download it. Because I know in the lab one time we had a problem where people weren't seeing the file and you had to download it. And if you have any problem, let me know. But I'm going to do a Control-A or Command-A. It's Command-A on a Mac, Control-A on Windows. And I'm going to highlight everything. And then I'll do Control-C if I'm on Windows and Command-C on a Mac and copy all that text. And then I don't need this anymore. And then I'm going to go back here to phpMyAdmin, and I'm going to paste it here. And it's a lot of stuff. You see, it's 278 lines of code. It's a lot of stuff if you go through all of it. It's every country in the world. You don't have to even look at it right now. All that you have to do is go down here at the very bottom and hit the go button. If you can't see that, it's down here at the bottom right. It's a go button, and that's all you have to do is just paste it in there and hit go. Now, you will get an error message, but just ignore it. Hit go, and you should get that. If you see a green check mark, that's a good thing. It just says 0 rows. Either way, green check mark is good. It means it's okay. Now, you don't see it in the list yet, but if you go to databases, you should see world there. And you might even have to go here and refresh it. If you go here and refresh this thing, it'll show you your world database. And whether you click here or here, you'll see that there's a table in there called country. Now, notice it's not countries, it's country. And this is the structure here, and this is the table structure. So there's my country table. So instead of typing code to view this, you could just click on country, and these are all the countries. And whoa, wait a minute, just ignore this. I told you you're going to get some errors, so just do ignore all. And these are all the countries in the world. Now you might say, well, there's not that many. There's more countries than that. There's actually 239. Now keep in mind, in phpMyAdmin, it shows 25 rows at a time. So you'd have to show all. There's a number here. I don't know how many there are, but there's a number of pages. It only shows 25 on a page at a time. So this is only showing rows 0 through 24, 0 being row 1. They use computer speak here. So there's 0 through 24, which is 25 rows. So there's 239 countries, and this is where you'll see your query results here when we start running queries in here, which we can do. We'll use this thing. So you can go to SQL and run queries. And you could run any kind of query. You could say select all from country, that's the table, and I could say continent. I could double click over here and say continent. Now these have these little ticks in here that you can put in, or you don't even need them, but they do them by default. Continent equals North America. So I'm going to put North America. You may not know what it's called or whatever, but I'm just telling you right now. So I'm going to put in North America, and I'm using a single quote, and that's okay. And I'll put a semicolon, and that's how you'd run a query in here. Instead of doing it like we did it in the console, you could do it right here. And I'm saying select all from country where continent equals North America, and I'll hit go. And it'll respond and say there's 37 countries in the continent of North America. And here's all the countries. There's a whole bunch. So this is not the region. There's also a region of North America, but these are the countries in North America. So we just ran a query, and we're getting a result back, and it's showing these are all the columns up at the top. And notice that they're using capital letters, even though we don't do that. But notice there's no spaces in here either. So that's a kind of a nice way to run queries is in phpMyAdmin, which we couldn't do with Python Anywhere, but we can do it here. And we could also do it locally if we were using amps. But anyway, that's just running a query. So that's all we need to do right now. I'm just running a query. It's not really doing anything. You could go back to browse, and it'll show you your whole thing again. And if you get this message, just ignore it from now, because I'm not even sure where I got this world database from, but it works. And I just put the countries in. I did not put all the cities in right now, because I'm sure you're tired of geography. And the next thing we're going to do is connect to this database. Once you have it in here and it's working, we're going to connect to it using this. So this is how we're going to connect to the database. So that's the nice thing about using this is we have some visuals, and we're going to write code to connect to it. And we're not doing everything in a console like we were doing with Python Anywhere. So we're going to connect to that database, and what we'll need to do first is get some other code that connects to the database, to the server, but it's not showing that it's connecting to the database. And we have code to do that. We're going to go to W3 Schools, and if you go down here, they have create database, create table. We want to select and show data. So we'll use select down here, just like we did with the Python Connect. We did it the same way. But anyway, we're going to do the select data. And if you just scroll down, and they have the object oriented, we're going to use the procedural, and we're going to use this. And without really learning anything about it yet, we know we can go through it and figure out some things just from what's here, but we're going to use this to start. We're not going to do it line by line, but we're going to highlight this whole thing here under MySQLi procedural, and it's under my select data. So I'm going to copy all this stuff here, and I don't have to run an example. I'm just going to copy it. So I'm going to copy this code, and I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to paste it over this completely. So even though we connected with this, we're going to use different code on top of this. So on the same file, our index.php file that is open here, we're going to paste this. And some things, we have to go back and change this. So this will be, username will be phpMyAdmin, and make sure you spell it right. And this will be root, and your DB will be world. And if you're not sure, check here. It's called world lowercase. So use a lowercase for that and spell it right. And if you spell it wrong, you're going to get an error. And here the connection is now connecting to server name, username, password, and database name. It has a variable that represents the database name, which is world. And again, if it doesn't connect, it'll show you a connect error. And if it does connect, it's actually running a query. You can recognize this right here. This is an SQL query, and here's a $SQL, a variable that's representing the query. And then there's a result that's saying run this function and connect, and then run this query. And then basically, if you get a result, if you get any results that are greater than 0 from the query, it'll output them in this little while loop, which is a programming term, meaning that it'll keep repeating while there's information there. There's usually some condition. So while it's getting results, it's going to basically echo, and echo is PHP's way of kind of printing out results. And the results coming right now this is just generic. So you could change this. We're not going to use ID. We're going to use code. If you remember what the database looked like, and if you're not sure, just go look at the database. You can see it has code. We're just going to do code, name, and continent. Those columns right now. We're just going to do the code, name, and continent. And you can add all kinds of things in here like regular strings to make it look better, but I'll just follow this because that way I won't screw it up. So it's going to say code and then a colon and a space, and that's the space is built in there. And then there's a dot which connects, and this is actually the row, this is the column name. And the column name that we're going to use first is going to be code. So it has to be exactly like it is here. It has to say code with a capital C. So that's what we're putting in there. So that's going to say code. And then this is just a string. It's saying name, and it has first name, but that's just a generic thing. That's not what we're using. We're going to use name with a capital N. So we're going to go back here, and this is the actual column name. Even though it says row, we're putting in the columns here. And we're going to say name, and that has to be spelled right. And then it's just using a space, which is fine for now. We could just leave that there. And then for last name, we're just going to throw in continent. And you could put in region, whatever, but I'll just put in continent. Again, we're just testing it. So we're going to put in continent. And for here, I have to put in continent. And you have to spell it right. So if you spell this wrong, it's not going to work. So if you're not good at spelling continent, you might want to, it's not an easy one, continent. And that looks right. And let's try it out. Let's save it. And I'm skipping something, but I'm doing that on purpose. So don't say, hey, wait a minute, you didn't change anything. Let's just save it and see what happens. So I'm going to save it. And then when it's saved, you'll see an X there. It's in blue. It's hard to see, but it's saved. And what I'm going to do is, now I don't have my other window open, if you remember. So here's my container thing. Here's my work environment, my IDE. And here's my phpMyAdmin. And I'll keep this open. It's fine to keep this open. I'll open another window. It'll be my fourth Goorm window. But if I go back here, remember to open that window to run PHP, we have to go to Project, Running URL and Port, and then we open this up, and that'll be another tab. And if I go to Goorm PHP, I could go here first. That'll take us into our container window, and what I'll do here is just click at the end here and do ex8. And I'm getting 0 results. And that's actually good because I'm not getting an error, but I'm not getting any results. And that's because we didn't do the query yet. And I could cancel out of here. It'll still be connected, but I'll just cancel that window. And we connected here, but our query doesn't have anything to do with our database. So what we can do here, we can do one just like the one we did for North America. We could do the same query. And we can select code. We could use the same things that are showing up here. Select code. And then we'll select name, and I could even copy it from here. Instead of first name, we'll use name, and instead of last name, we'll use continent. So I'll copy it from there. And we're not going from my guest, we're going from country. Now it's not countries, it's country. So it's country like that. It's singular country, that's the name of the table. So this is our query that we're running. We're selecting 3 columns, because you remember how to do that, from the country table, because that's the only table in there. And then it's outputting these strings plus the code, whatever is returned from that column, whatever is returned from that column. And even if you wanted to do something like, well, I'll do it regular first. And what I'll do is I'll save it. So I'll do Control S or Command S. And then I'll go here and I'll just refresh it. You shouldn't have to do anything else. If you save it, just refresh it. And there's our results. And now it's not showing results, it's showing everything right now, which is 239 countries. And it doesn't look very nice right now, because eventually we're going to put it in a table and make everything look nice. And eventually we're going to make a little interface where we can add things to a database. Not the world database, because we don't need to add any more countries, but we'll make this look nice. We'll do that eventually in upcoming exercises. But right now we're getting information from a database to display on a web page, and that's pretty cool. And we're doing it all online. We're not doing it locally in AMPS. So that's what's cool about Goorm as well. So one thing you could do, so there's so many here, just to make it look nicer, if you actually want to go here and just put like a limit, if you wanted to limit it, remember you could do that. It's just regular SQL, limit 30. And you just put 30 there and save it. And then if you go back here and you refresh it, now you only have 30 showing up. And if you wanted to see all the ones that are just from North America, we could do like a little filter here. We could say select code, name, continent from country, and we could say where. We could do like the other one we did, where continent, and oh, it's coming up. There we go. Where continent equals, and I think we can do a little break here after the comma. I'm going to do a shift return. As long as the color doesn't change, it should be okay. And I'm going to say where continent equals. Now, be careful here, because notice we have quotes around our query. but then we're going to put single quotes around the item that we're basically limiting here. So you want to use single quotes when you say North America. So it's a little confusing, and you want to finish that off with a single quote. So there's double quotes around the whole query, and then there's single quotes around North America. So make sure you do that. Don't get messed up with your quotes. So this is going to select code name continent from country where the continent is North America. So this will be only North American country. And if you weren't sure how many there are, you're going to get to find out right now. Let's just save it. And then we're going to go to our page, and I'll refresh. And you could see there's a whole bunch. There's probably, I don't know, 40 some, 30 some. If you're not sure, you could always go here and figure them out here too. We can also write code that'll show us how many if we want, but I'm not sure how many are coming back right now. We would have to do a query to get a count of that. But there's a lot. There might be 30 or 40 right here that are showing up on a page. And if you want to limit them, you could go here and say, right after the single quote there, just say like limit 30. And notice there's still single quote on North America. And again, I'll save it. And then I'll go here and I'll just show 30 of them. So there must have been maybe like 37 or so. And also, you might see some of these things here and you might think, wow, I didn't think all these things were in North America. That's the continent of North America. If you want to see the region of North America, and that's the last thing you could do here, is you could say where region, we'll do our last query here, and we'll say where region equals North America. And I'll take off the limit. I don't need a limit because there's not that many. But remember to have the double quotes around the whole query and single quotes around North America. So we're going to change this to region equals North America. And if you're like, well, how did you know region? Well, there's region right here. And I could have I could have went in SQL, and they show you all the columns here too. That way you can always copy and paste them from here if you need to. These are all the columns in our database. That's what's nice about using something like phpMyAdmin. It's a little easier than just typing everything in a console and remembering what it looked like, especially with a big database, because there's a lot to scroll through and see. So we know there's region here, and we're going to use region, and they have a capital R. So I'm going to go back to here, and I have select code name continent from country where region equals North America. So that's going to be my new query. So I'm going to save it, and then I'll go back here, and I'll just refresh the page, and I only get this many back. And that's pretty much the end of this assignment. So what you're going to do now is you can just copy this. You wouldn't have to do this. I'll be able to go in here and see this as long as you have all your permissions set up. And you can copy this, and you can go back here. And if this is open and saved, you can just X out of that and close that. And I'm going to make a new file, and I'll put it right in my ex8 because I'm in there right now. I'm going to make a new file. And I'll just call it results.txt. I'll just make a text file, and it's inside ex8. I'll make it results, and I'll hit OK. And that way you can go in here and just paste it in. Now, I could run your query and see that you did it right, but that way we can paste our query right in here, and it looks nice. So that's in our results.txt, and it's in your ex8 folder. So that way I could go in here and look in here and see that you did it right, because you wouldn't be able to get this unless you saw that, unless you ran through and do it. Plus, I'll look at your PHP as well. I'll be able to look at your PHP file, open that up, and look at your PHP and make sure that you have all your stuff correct in here, that you changed your query, and that you changed these things down here. So I'll make sure that you did all that, and you could just make a results.txt, a text file. I'll save it, and then I'll close it, and that'll be your proof that you did this exercise. I'll close that, and then I'll open this up again, this little tab down here, and I'll just stop my SQL. And to stop SQL, you can just go exit, and now you're out of MySQL. Now, when you're in here, you don't have to do anything else. You could close your container, and then you can sign out when you're done. So that's going to be the last thing you're going to do. You can go to the exercise, which I don't have set up. I don't even have the instructions set up. I'm doing them from notes I wrote down on pages of paper. You could certainly go through this and do it without having my instructions set up, but I'll post them as well. And once you exit out of MySQL, go here, and I always recommend just kind of logging off. They have a little log out there, so you could log off of phpMyAdmin, and then you could close up that window. You can close this up, and we don't need W3 Schools. And in here, we can close the container. So the container's still running, so that's why we're still seeing the the results showing up there. So you can close the container. So if you go over here, you can close the container first. And it says, are you sure you want to leave the container? And yes. And that'll take you back to here, and there's your container. And then you could sign out if you want to. You can go here, and then you could sign out, and you'll be all done. And then just put a comment in the exercise for ex8 and just say, hey, all the work is completed for ex8, and I'll go check out your container. Again, if you have any problems with Goorm, with connecting, actually, let me show you something really quick. This is just a ping file, but when you're in there and you use this share thing, make sure that you have this set up. And I think I have all of your links already. You can always give me the link again, but make sure that you're set up so that it says regardless of container owner's connection. Make sure any Goorm user is checked here. And then make sure at the bottom you have this little radio button, editable root, so that I can go in there and see it. Because if any of these things is not set up, I may not be able to see your stuff in there. Even if you can see it, I want to be able to see it so that I can go in there and check out your queries and all that. So make sure that you have this set up in your share settings. Again, this is just a screenshot because I already logged out. And then that's all you have to do for ex8. And then we're going to keep doing more with PHP. We'll start doing some more queries with databases, and then we'll start actually building databases and creating an interface that we can actually add things to a database and display them a little bit nicer on a web page.